My cousin and I finished business school together, but our grandparents paid off his debt while ignoring mine. The black gown felt heavier than it should have as I stood in line waiting for my name to be called. 4 years of sleepless nights culminating in this moment. Natalie Reyes, summa cum laude. 4 years of juggling 3 part-time jobs while maintaining a perfect GPA. 4 years of saying no to spring breaks and campus parties so I could pull all-nighters in the library. And now, finally, graduating at the top of my class from Wharton's business program. 3 people ahead of me in line stood my cousin Liam, fidgeting with his phone as usual. Same last name, same graduation day, worlds apart in effort. His gown was unzipped, revealing the custom-tailored suit Uncle Robert had bought him for the occasion. A suit that probably cost more than 3 months of my rent. Liam Reyes, the dean announced. A thunderous applause erupted from our family section, louder than for any other graduate so far. Abuela Sofia stood waving both arms like she was guiding a plane to landing. Abuelo Miguel whistled through his fingers, something I'd only seen him do at professional baseball games. Even my own parents were on their feet, beaming with pride for their nephew, who had barely maintained a C average throughout college. The golden boy, the future of the family, the grandson. I watched as Liam sauntered across the stage, his walk somewhere between a strut and a swagger. He accepted his diploma with his trademark grin, the same grin that had charmed professors into extending deadlines and talked campus security out of writing him up for the infamous fountain incident sophomore year. Natalie Reyes, the dean, called next. I stepped forward, heart pounding, scanning the crowd for my family's reaction. They were clapping, of course, politely, appropriately. My mother smiled, my father nodded approvingly. But the energy was nothing like the celebration that had preceded me moments before. Later, at Le Bernardin, because Abuela insisted, only the best for our graduates, I sat silently calculating how many hours I'd need to work at the campus bookstore to afford even the cheapest appetizer on the menu. The irony wasn't lost on me. A business degree that had landed me $87,000 in debt, and here I was, surrounded by luxury I couldn't afford. A toast, Abuelo Miguel announced, rising to his feet and lifting his champagne glass. The chatter around our private dining room quieted. Today we celebrate 2 extraordinary young people who carry our family's legacy forward. His eyes drifted between Liam and me, though lingering noticeably longer on my cousin. Education is the greatest gift we can give to the next generation, he continued, but in this country, it comes at a great cost. My heart suddenly quickened. Were they going to help with my loans? I never asked, never expected it, but the possibility bloomed inside me. Perhaps they had recognized my hard work after all. Which is why Sophia and I are proud to announce that as of this morning, we have paid off all of Liam's student debt. A fresh start for our grandson as he embarks on his business career. The table erupted in applause. My uncle slapped Liam on the back so hard he nearly face-planted into his lobster bisque. My mother reached for my hand beneath the table, a silent gesture of comfort or perhaps restraint. Liam looked genuinely surprised and, for a brief moment, touched. He stood and embraced our grandparents, his eyes suspiciously bright. "I don't know what to say," he murmured. "Thank you. I promise I'll make you proud." I waited for the other shoe to drop, for them to turn to me and say something like, "And of course for our Natalie, who graduated top of her class." But the moment never came. The conversation shifted to Liam's startup ideas and how this freedom from debt would allow him to really swing for the fences. I felt my mother's hand squeeze my knee under the table, a silent plea to keep smiling, to not make a scene. So I did what generations of women in my family had done before me. I swallowed the lump in my throat, raised my glass, and toasted to Liam's good fortune. Later, in the restaurant's opulent bathroom, I stared at my reflection in the gold-framed mirror. Behind me, the door swung open and Abuela Sofia entered, her jewelry catching the light as she moved. "There you are, mi amor," she said, fishing a lipstick from her designer purse. "Isn't this night wonderful? Your cousin a real businessman now." "And me?" The words escaped before I could stop them. She paused, lipstick hovering near her mouth. What about you, Carino? I graduated too. Top of our class. Something flickered across her face. Discomfort, perhaps, or the briefest recognition of inequity. But it vanished quickly. Of course you did, mi amor. We've always known you were the smart one. She applied her lipstick with practiced precision. But Liam, he needs more help. You understand, yes? You've always been so independent, so capable. I understood perfectly. My success was expected. Unremarkable. Liam's mediocrity was celebrated because no one actually believed he could achieve anything on his own. Besides, she continued, dropping her lipstick back into her purse with a definitive click, you know how to be practical. Liam has such big dreams. The next Mark Zuckerberg, he says. Your grandfather believes in investing in vision. What about investing in hard work? In sacrifice? In the granddaughter who had given everything to make her family proud? As we left the restaurant, Liam caught up to me on the sidewalk. Hey, crazer party, right? He jingled his car keys, a graduation gift from his parents. Wanna grab a real drink somewhere? Celebrate cousin style. I looked at him, really looked at him, wondering if he had any idea, any concept of the disparity between us. But his eyes held only the casual entitlement of someone who had never questioned their place in the world. I can't, I said. Early, start tomorrow. As I watched him drive away in his new BMW, something hardened inside me. A resolve that went beyond anger or jealousy. I made a silent promise to myself as I stood there on that New York sidewalk. This wasn't about the money. This was about being seen, valued, respected. And one day, they would all see exactly what I was worth. 3 months after graduation, my alarm blared at 5 a.m. I rolled over in my tiny Brooklyn studio apartment, a shoebox with peeling paint where the rent ate nearly half my paycheck from Digital Edge, the marketing startup where I'd landed an entry-level position. I silenced the alarm and opened my laptop. 2 hours of freelance work before my day job. 2 hours after. Weekend gigs whenever I could find them. This was my life now, a constant hustle to make my $843 monthly student loan payment while building something resembling a career. My phone buzzed with a notification. Another family WhatsApp message, another Liam update. This time it was Uncle Robert sharing a link. NextConnect named among top 20 startups to watch by TechVision magazine. NextConnect, Liam's revolutionary professional networking platform. Funded by Abuelo Miguel and family friends who owed our grandparents favors. My mother immediately replied with 6 exclamation points and 3 heart emojis. So proud of our boy. I set my phone face down and returned to my freelance project, social media content for a dental office. Not exactly world-changing work, but it paid $25 an hour. Money that went straight to Sally Mae. 2 weeks later, I was leaving the Digital Edge office when I heard a familiar voice. I turned to see Liam jogging toward me, dressed in a designer hoodie that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. I thought that was you, he grinned. What are you doing in this neighborhood? I work here. I gestured to the building behind me. Never heard of it, he said dismissively. Hey, we just moved into our new offices. You've got to come see. We've got a rock climbing wall and cold brew on tap. Against my better judgment, I followed him. The something he wanted my opinion on turned out to be which designer should create NextConnect's new logo, the $15,000 option or the $20,000 one. Meanwhile, I was making coffee at home to save $4 a day. NextConnect's office was exactly what you'd expect. Open concept, neon inspirational quotes, 20-somethings lounging on beanbag chairs with MacBooks. We're burning through cash faster than expected, Liam confided, but Abuelo says that's normal for high-growth companies. We're projecting profitability by Q3. I nodded, not bothering to point out that they'd need actual revenue first. What about you? He asked in afterthought. How's your dental thing going? That's just freelance work, I corrected. I'm at Digital Edge full-time, and I'm working on something on the side. Oh, his interest seemed genuine if fleeting. It's logistics software for small businesses. It helps them optimize their supply chain without enterprise-level costs. His eyes glazed over instantly. Sounds practical. The word landed like an insult. But hey, if anyone can make boring stuff work, it's you. That night, I worked until 2 a.m. on my logistics software prototype. Not because I expected it to make me rich or famous, but because I saw a real problem I could solve. Because I believed in building something with substance. Thanksgiving arrived with predictable fanfare. The family gathered at Abuelo and Abuela's house, where Liam held court. We just closed our seed round at $8 million, he announced. Venture capital is flowing into the professional networking space right now. Such a visionary. Tia Carmen cooed, just like your grandfather. I sat silently, passing the mashed potatoes, when Abuela finally turned to me and asked, "And you, mi amor, any exciting news?" Cousin Miguel Jr. interrupted.
Mom,
Did you know Liam's company has a meditation room? With actual sand from a Japanese Zen garden. And just like that, I was invisible again. But invisibility had its advantages. While Liam was being featured in 30 under 30 lists and burning through investor cash, I was learning, growing, building something real, brick by digital brick. My days fell into a ruthless routine. Day job, freelance work, my software project, networking events, online courses to sharpen my skills, sleep when I could fit it in. Then came the night that changed everything. A women in tech mixer in a downtown loft. I almost didn't go, deadline pressure, exhaustion, the usual. But something pushed me out the door. I spotted her immediately. Sarah Kong, the woman who had built and sold 2 logistics companies before 40. She was surrounded by admirers, but I waited patiently at the edge of the circle until it thinned. "Excuse me, Ms. Kong?" My voice was steadier than I felt. "I'm Natalie Reyes. I'm working on a logistics platform for small businesses, and I'd love your perspective." She looked me over, not unkindly. "You have 2 minutes. What's your value proposition?" I didn't waste a second. I explained my software, how it gave small businesses the supply chain insights that only big corporations typically access, how it could save them thousands while increasing efficiency. No buzzwords, just solid business logic. When I finished, she studied me with new interest. "Send me your prototype and your business plan." 3 weeks and 17 revisions later, Sarah's email arrived. "I want to invest. Let's talk numbers." I didn't post on social media. I didn't announce it in the family chat. I just kept working, building, growing, and watching from the periphery as Liam's star began to fade. Because here's what the glossy magazine profiles didn't show. NextConnect's user numbers were inflated. Their burn rate was unsustainable. And slowly, industry insiders were starting to whisper that the emperor had no clothes. But I kept my head down and my eyes on my own path. Not out of bitterness, but because I'd learned the most important business lesson of all, one they'd never taught us at Wharton. True success isn't built on hype and handouts. It's built in silence with substance. And someday soon, that silence would speak volumes. 5 years after graduation, I stepped off the elevator into Logie Smart's headquarters on the 18th floor of a midtown tower. My company, 42 employees, 400 clients, and a valuation that had recently crossed the 9-figure mark. I paused in the lobby, gazing at the framed Fortune magazine article calling me refreshingly substance-focused in an industry drowning in hype. It wasn't the greatest compliment, but it was honest. Just like my business. My assistant, Tara, met me at the door with my schedule and a latte. "The Singapore team is online in 15 minutes. Also, Sarah called. She wants to discuss the Series C funding." As I settled into my office, modest but with a stunning view of the city, my phone lit up with a notification. The family WhatsApp group, which I still hadn't muted despite my better judgment. "Have you all seen this?" Uncle Miguel had shared a link to a TechCrunch article. NextConnect, the rise and fall of another overhyped startup. For once, the family chat fell silent. No exclamation points. No heart emojis. Just uncomfortable digital quiet. I clicked the link despite myself. The article was brutal. Plummeting user engagement. Inflated metrics. A business model that had failed to generate sustainable revenue. Internal documents showed NextConnect had less than 6 months of runway left before bankruptcy. I closed the article without finishing it. This wasn't satisfaction I felt, more like a strange emptiness. I never wished for Liam's failure. 3 days later, at the monthly family brunch, the tension was thick enough to cut with the butter knife I was using on my toast. Abuela's dining room, usually buzzing with conversation, was uncharacteristically subdued. Liam arrived late, slipping in with a mumbled apology. I almost didn't recognize him. Gone was the designer wear and carefully styled hair. His button-down shirt needed ironing, and dark circles ringed his eyes. When he reached for the orange juice, I noticed his Rolex was missing, another graduation gift. "Your company's doing very well, isn't it, Natalie?" my mother ventured, breaking a painful silence. I nodded, uncomfortable with attention that had rarely been directed my way. "We're growing steadily. I read that article about you," Tia Carmen said. "The one that called you, what was it? The logistics whisper?" "Supply chain specialist," I corrected gently. "You know, Natalie was always the smart one," Abuelo Miguel announced suddenly, as if he'd been the one saying it all along. "Always practical. Always thinking ahead." The revisionist history was almost comical. But their attempts at course correction weren't what caught my attention. It was Liam's face, a complex mixture of shame, resentment, and something else I couldn't quite identify. That's really great, Nat," Liam said suddenly, his voice rough. "You always were the smart one." Our eyes met across the table, and for the first time in our lives, I saw something new in his expression. Respect. Tinged with envy, perhaps, but genuine respect. Abuela, desperate to avoid uncomfortable topics, turned to him. "And your company, Liam? The social thing." His smile was brittle. "We're pivoting, exploring new opportunities." The brunch ended earlier than usual. As I gathered my things to leave, Abuelo Miguel stopped me. "Your company, it's doing well?" he asked, his voice quieter than usual. "Yes," I said simply. "Very well." He nodded, his eyes not quite meeting mine. "I always knew you had it in you." I wanted to ask why, if he always knew, he had never invested in me the way he had in Liam. But I just thanked him and left. That night, as I sat in my Chelsea apartment, my phone buzzed with a text message from a number I rarely saw anymore. "Can we talk? Just you and me, please. Liam." I stared at the phone, a strange mixture of emotions washing over me. 5 years ago, I would have finished for the family's recognition. For Liam to see me as an equal, or maybe even better at something. Now that I had it, it felt complicated. "Where and when?" I texted back. His response came immediately. "Tomorrow? Coffee? I can come to you." I suggested a quiet place in the West Village, far from our usual haunts. Neutral territory. As I set my phone down, I caught my reflection in the window. 5 years ago, I'd promised that one day they would all see what I was worth. Now they did. And it had nothing to do with their validation or Liam's failure. It had everything to do with the path I'd charted for myself, built on late nights and early mornings, on substance over style, on proving my worth not to them but to myself. The tables had turned, yes. But the victory wasn't in their recognition. It was in realizing I no longer needed it. I arrived 15 minutes early to the coffee shop, a habit from years of proving myself. I ordered a simple black coffee and selected a corner table where I could watch the door. When Liam walked in, I almost didn't recognize him. The cousin who once commanded every room now moved with a hesitancy I'd never seen before. His clothing was clean but unremarkable, a plain button-down and jeans that weren't designer. The swagger was gone, replaced by something that looked suspiciously like humility. "Thanks for meeting me," he said, his voice lacking its usual projection. "I know we haven't. I haven't been the best cousin." I took a sip of my coffee, letting the silence stretch. 5 years ago, I'd have rushed to fill any uncomfortable pause, to make things easier for everyone else. Not anymore. "I've been following LogiSmart," he continued. The Forbes profile was impressive. Revolutionary approach to supply chain management. "Turns out you're boring, idea wasn't so boring after all. It was never about being exciting, I said. It was about solving real problems. He nodded, staring into his untouched coffee. Yeah, I get that now. He gave a hollow laugh. About 5 years and $8 million too late. The vulnerability in his voice was jarring. This wasn't the Liam I knew, the golden boy, the entitled charmer who expected the world to bend to his will. Look, I'll just say it, he continued. NextConnect is done. The investors pulled out last week. We're filing for bankruptcy. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, and part of me genuinely was. No, you're not, he said, with a flash of the old Liam. Then his shoulders slumped. And you shouldn't be. I was an ass. I had everything handed to me, and I blew it. I studied him closely. Is this where you ask me for money? His face flushed. Not exactly. The thing is, I've got one last idea. Something with substance this time. You want me to invest in your new startup? My voice was cooler than I intended. He rushed on. Or maybe a job? At LogiSmart. That stopped me short. A job. I know I don't have direct experience in logistics, he said quickly, but I've learned so much from my mistakes. I could bring value in marketing partnerships. Wait, I interrupted. You want to work for me? Liam Reyes wants to work for his cousin who does boring stuff? The cosmic joke of it all was almost too perfect. I deserve that, he admitted. But yes, I want to work for LogiSmart. For you. A memory flashed unbidden. Liam at our graduation dinner, accepting Abuelo's gift, the family's adoration, while I sat invisible. Why should I help you, Liam? I asked quietly. Give me one reason that isn't about family obligation. He flinched as if I'd slapped him. For a moment, I saw a flash of the old Liam, entitled, incredulous that anyone would question his worth. But it faded quickly. Because I was wrong, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. About business. About you. About everything. He stared at his hands. I thought success was about flash and connections. But you were building something real while I was burning through cash on office perks and influencer campaigns. I was silent, processing his words. I thought Abuelo paid off my loans because he believed in me more than you, he continued. Now I realize he did it because he didn't think I could make it on my own. He knew you could. The insight surprised me and rang true in a way I hadn't considered. I don't deserve your help, he said simply. But I want to learn. From you. How to build something real. What would you bring to my company? I asked finally. And don't say your connections. We both know those aren't worth much right now. He considered the question with a seriousness I'd never seen from him. I understand failure, he said finally. I know every mistake not to make. That's got to be worth something. And I work hard, he added, as if the thought had just occurred to him. I mean, I always could, I just never had to before. But these last few months, trying to save NextConnect, I've never worked harder in my life. The shadows under his eyes testified to sleepless nights that had nothing to do with partying. I need to think about it, I said. He nodded quickly, relief flooding his features. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. Thank you. For hearing me out. For not. Not what? Not enjoying this as much as you could have. He attempted a smile. I would have if the roles were reversed. His honesty was disarming. The old Liam would have charmed, deflected, manipulated. This new version was real. Flawed and humbled, but real. As we stood to leave, I realized something unexpected. The victory I'd once imagined, Liam admitting I was better, begging for my help, didn't feel like victory at all. It felt complicated, human, and strangely hollow. The decision before me wasn't about revenge or validation anymore. It was about what kind of person, what kind of leader I wanted to be. And as I walked back to my office, I already knew what my answer would be. 3 days after our coffee shop meeting, I called Liam. I have a position for you, I said without preamble. Customer success representative. Entry level. Standard salary, no special treatment, no fancy title. The silence on the other end stretched so long, I thought the call had dropped. You'd report to Maya Chen, our customer success director? I continued. Not to me. You're offering me an entry-level job? His voice held a mixture of disbelief and something else, perhaps humility. I'm offering you a chance, I corrected. Nothing more, nothing less. You'd work the same hours as everyone else, meet the same targets, prove yourself like everyone else on the team had to. Another silence. I could almost hear him weighing his options, his pride battling with desperation. When can I start? He asked finally. 2 weeks later, Liam Reyes joined Logi Smart Solutions. I told Maya the bare minimum. He was my cousin, he needed a fresh start, and he should be treated exactly like any other new hire. The whispers around the office were inevitable. A few employees recognized him from tech events. Isn't that Natalie's cousin? The one who had that failed startup. I heard his family paid for his entire education. Must be weird for him, working for her. I neither confirmed nor denied. Some lessons needed to be learned in silence. To my surprise, Liam showed up 15 minutes early every day. He took notes during training. He asked thoughtful questions. When a customer called with a complex problem that stretched past 6 p.m., he stayed late to solve it, even though it meant missing his train. I kept my distance professionally, limiting our interactions to brief nods in the hallway or standard exchanges in team meetings. But I watched, and I listened. Liam's doing it, Maya told me during our monthly review. His customer satisfaction scores are the highest in the department, and he's got this knack for translating technical concepts into plain language. Interesting, I said, keeping my tone neutral. Any issues with team dynamics? Actually, no. He's been surprisingly humble. She laughed. Not what I expected from a former CEO. Former founder. I corrected automatically. Right. She studied me for a moment. You know, he never mentions the family connection. Never tries to leverage it. It's like he's determined to make it on his own merits. This wasn't the revenge I'd imagined all those years ago. There was no satisfaction in watching Liam struggle or work his way up from the bottom. Instead, I felt something unexpected. Respect. Not because I'd finally gotten even, but because he was earning it day by day. One evening, working late, I found Liam still at his desk, poring over product documentation. You know, you don't have to outwork everyone to prove yourself, I said, stopping by his cubicle. He looked up, startled. That's funny, coming from you. What do you mean? Come on, Nat. You've been outworking everyone since we were kids. He smiled ruefully. I just never noticed because I wasn't paying attention. 2 months into Liam's tenure, I received a text from my mother. Is it true Liam is working for you? Followed immediately by, Abuela is asking. Family dinner next Sunday? The family dinner was exactly as awkward as I'd anticipated. Abuelo Miguel spent the first 20 minutes regaling everyone with stories of Logi Smart's recent press coverage, as if he'd been my champion all along. Abuela kept steering the conversation toward Liam's exciting new role. It's an entry-level position, Abuela, Liam corrected gently. I'm still learning the ropes. But you're on the executive track, yes? No, he said simply. I'm earning my place, just like everyone else. Later, as people moved to the living room for coffee, I found myself alone with Liam in the kitchen. You could have humiliated me, he said quietly, rinsing dishes. You could have refused to hire me, or given me some made-up job where I couldn't do any harm. That wouldn't have benefited anyone, I replied. Least of all Logi Smart. Still, he handed me a plate to dry. Thank you for giving me a real chance, for not making it about the past. In that moment, I realized something profound. The sweetest revenge wasn't in humiliating Liam or proving myself to the family. It was in this quiet transformation, his and mine. In the recognition dawning in his eyes that the cousin he'd once dismissed was now someone he genuinely respected. And in my own recognition that I no longer needed their validation to know my worth. The customer satisfaction reports show you have a real talent for this, I said, changing the subject. Maya thinks you might be ready to train new hires soon. His face lit up with a pride I'd never seen before. Not the entitled pride of someone given accolades they hadn't earned, but the quiet satisfaction of recognition deserved. As we returned to the dining room, I noticed my grandmother watching us with a puzzled expression. For decades, she'd seen what she expected to see. Liam, the natural leader, Natalie, the reliable support. Now the roles had reversed, and she couldn't quite make sense of it. That was the true victory. Not that I'd risen while he'd fallen, but that we both understood the why of it. The substance behind the trajectories. The reality that had always existed beneath the family mythology. No grand confrontation. No public humiliation. Just the silent, relentless truth asserting itself, one workday at a time. 1 year after Liam joined Logie Smart, our grandparents celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary. The family gathered at their New Jersey home where Liam and I had played as children, oblivious to the different paths laid before us. I arrived late due to a client meeting. Stepping into the backyard, I spotted Liam by the grill with Uncle Roberto. Gone was the designer clothing and carefully styled hair. He looked comfortable in his own skin, his smile genuine rather than performed. "Natalia," Abuela called, waving me over. "Come, sit. We were just discussing your European expansion." As I settled beside Abuelo, I caught Liam's eye. He raised his beer bottle slightly, acknowledgement without interruption. A year ago, he would have inserted himself into the conversation, steering it toward his achievements. Now, he simply let me have my moment. Later, as dessert was served, Abuelo called for everyone's attention, raising his glass. 50 years with this incredible woman, he began. What matters isn't time, but what you build in that time. His eyes found mine, then shifted to Liam. I am particularly proud of our grandchildren. Liam, who has shown such growth and maturity this year, who has discovered the value of hard work and perseverance. Liam ducked his head, accepting the attention with grace I wouldn't have thought him capable of a year ago. And Natalie, Abuelo continued, whose brilliance and determination have built something truly remarkable. A leader who lifts others up rather than leaving them behind. The pointed comment wasn't lost on anyone. A few relatives shifted uncomfortably, perhaps remembering how they'd overlooked me while celebrating Liam's empty successes. To family, Abuelo concluded. To growth. To second chances. As the evening progressed, I slipped away to the front porch swing, where Liam and I had spent countless summer evenings dreaming of our futures. The metal chains creaked familiarly as I sat. "Mind if I join you?" Liam appeared with 2 glasses of champagne. We sat in comfortable silence, listening to cicadas and distant laughter from inside. "Remember when we used to talk about changing the world from the swing?" he asked finally. "You wanted to be the next Steve Jobs," I recalled. "I wanted to build systems that worked." He laughed softly. "Guess one of us stayed true to the plan. We both took the journey we needed to take." He twisted his glass between his fingers. "Maya's recommended me for team lead." "I know. I approved it yesterday." I smiled at his surprised expression. "You earned it, Liam. Your metrics are exceptional, and you've built strong relationships with clients and colleagues. It's a merit-based promotion." "Thank you." He paused before adding, "It means more, knowing it's real, that I didn't get it because of my name or connections. Or despite them," I added quietly. "I used to wonder why you worked so hard," he said thoughtfully. "I never considered that maybe I'd simply never had to. And now I understand the difference between being given something and earning it." His eyes met mine with newfound clarity. "The second one feels better, lasts longer." "Does it bother you," he asked suddenly, "that they only started seeing you after I failed?" The question surprised me with its insight. A year ago, it would have bothered me deeply. Now I found it almost amusing. "They didn't start seeing me after you failed," I corrected gently. "They started seeing me after I succeeded so dramatically they couldn't ignore it anymore. Your trajectory and mine were always separate stories, even if they seemed intertwined." He nodded. "You're right. And for what it's worth, I see you now. I always should have." As we walked back, Abuela intercepted us, her hands fluttering excitedly. "My 2 successful grandchildren. Liam tells us he's being promoted. Isn't that wonderful?" And all because you gave him a chance, Natalie. I felt Liam tense beside me, perhaps anticipating that I'd correct her, point out that he'd earned the promotion through merit, not favoritism. Instead, I just smiled. Liam is exceptionally good at what he does, I said simply. Logie Smart is lucky to have him. Driving home that night, I thought about that graduation dinner 5 years ago, sitting at Le Bernardin, watching my family celebrate Liam's potential while ignoring mine. About the promise I'd made to myself on that New York sidewalk. I'd wanted revenge, then wanted them all to see what I was worth. I'd gotten that, but not in the way I'd imagined. The sweetest revenge wasn't in Liam's humbling or my triumph. It wasn't even in the family's belated recognition. It was in building something real and enduring. In doing it without their help or attention. In choosing the harder, better path when I could have humiliated Liam. And perhaps most surprisingly, it was in watching my cousin transform from entitled golden boy to someone who understood the value of earning his place, someone who could now appreciate the journey I'd been on all along. I'd never needed their validation. I'd needed my own. And somewhere along the way, while building my company brick by digital brick, I'd found it. As for Liam, he may never say the words, "You were right and I was wrong." But every day he shows up early, stays late to solve a problem, or takes pride in a job well done. He's saying it louder than words ever could. And that's the sweetest revenge of all.